Benjamin Pasternack is the BCO soloist for Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 1 next season. Ben Pasternack has performed as soloist, recitalist, and chamber musician on 4 continents. His orchestral engagements have included appearances as soloist with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Orchestre Symphonique de Quebec, the Tonhalle Orchestra of Zurich, the New Japan Philharmonic, and numerous others. His appearances with the Boston Symphony include multiple international tours as the featured soloist. Mr. Pasternack was the grand prize winner of the inaugural World Music Masters Piano Competition, which carried a $30,000 award. We know who's buying lunch. And engagements across Europe and North America. In fact, he was also awarded the highest prize at the 40th Busoni International Piano Competition. Please welcome Jonathan Palevsky and Benjamin Pasternack.
So Benjamin Pasternack has been on faculty at Peabody since 1997, and you are a Curtis grad from Philadelphia.
That's right.
And your teachers are a pretty fascinating one, Mislav Horshovsky and Rudolf Serkin, correct?
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, this is an amazing lineage. When you came to Curtis at 13, was this an intimidating thing, or were you just too young to know any better at this point?
Oh, both. I was way too young to understand how intimidating it should be, but at the same time, it was extremely intimidating. You know, to this day, I still have a nightmare once in a while about the stairs up to Mr. Horshovsky's studio.
How old was he at that time?
Oh my goodness. I think he was about, well, he was in his 80s.
Wow. And you were 13.
So 13 when I began, yes.
Yeah.
So it was an amazing experience, a unique, unrepeatable experience. In fact, if you think about it, well, he was a great musician for sure. But just to speak about, you said the lineage, he studied with LISZT-BUSONI, who studied with Czerny, who studied with Beethoven. There are only 4 handshakes between myself and Beethoven.
And who taught Liszt? Czerny taught Liszt.
Czerny taught Liszt, yes, that's for sure. And all those, LISZT-BUSONI was a good close friend of Brahms. And Mr. Horshovsky himself, although he was reticent, he didn't speak to me very much about personal things or any anecdotes. But once in a while, something would come out. He knew all the great musicians of the 20th century. So I am in that sort of unique position. In fact, Leon Fleischer used to say to me, we're musical cousins, because he was also, I'm one of the last, I suppose, to only have those 3 guys between themselves right back to Beethoven.
If there was a central tenet that Horshovsky gave you, what would it be?
Oh, love of music. That's for sure. And what I mean by love is not just love, but devotion, service. It was almost extreme, you know. It expressed his own particular personality, that he was happy to study all day, and that satisfied him. Yeah, he played concerts, and I'm sure he wanted to at some point in his life, but he was happy not to play concerts also. He taught, and I'm sure he derived some satisfaction from it, but he was pleased not to teach also. But he couldn't go without music, and he was so devoted, and it was an amazing example. Something I didn't realize was that it expressed his own particular personality in the way that he behaved, and regular people can't really live up to that. If you see my heroes, Horowitz looks completely different from Rubinstein and looks completely different from Serkin, and yet they achieved tremendous things. So you have to find your way of doing it. When I first heard, well, not first, but when I was a teenager and heard Horowitz, I went home and started trying to imitate him physically. I watched him, and I tried to imitate him physically, and I brought it up to Mr. Horshovsky. I had a lesson, and I told him, Mr. Horshovsky, I don't think I'm really well prepared this week, because I heard Mr. Horowitz on Sunday. I had no idea that they were very close friends. And I said, I heard Mr. Horowitz on Sunday, and I've been uh, just playing what he played and trying to imitate him all week. And I thought I'd get yelled at, but he did not yell at me. He smiled, and I said, I've been sitting on a low stool and leaning forward and using my hands this way. I said, and he was just listening. I said, I don't think it's working. And he said to me, no, this will not work.
Wow.
I had many other great teachers, especially chamber music teachers and others. And I once told one of them, Felix Gallimir, all the teachers that I had, been fortunate to work with, and the level was so incredibly high. And he took a look at me and he said, "Well, if you don't turn out good, it's your own fault."
Let's talk a bit about Beethoven's first piano concerto, a work from the 1790s, the great period of imitation. And I'm curious, first off, how you approach this, because the inheritance is clearly Mozart's piano concertos.
By the time you get to Beethoven C major concerto, he's already using the piano in a slightly different way, and it has a little bit more sound. And he's developed a way of using technical brilliance to achieve a musical goal. If you go back less than 100 years, Bach really could only write pieces that were about serving God, and so he expressed himself in that way, and that was fine. Mozart was writing with certain limits, and again, he was able to express what people feel, but he couldn't say it as explicitly. Beethoven could just say, "Hey, here I am, and I'm the winner of this contest with an orchestra." A concerto is kind of a dramatic form, and you have the juxtaposition of the two, the piano. What's that? It's the old joke: piano versus orchestra, concerto for piano versus orchestra. So in some ways, it's really true, and so I would have to say I'm just trying to derive the message of the music from the score itself.
So this is in double exposition form, and I'm always dying to know, what are you thinking about while the orchestra plays its exposition, which is pretty lengthy in this? What do you think about while you're waiting? While you're waiting?
I follow the music. I'm thinking the music myself. I'm listening carefully. I'm just following the music. That's the best way to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if you've played so many times, you're used to being on stage, you might have those kind of thoughts like, did my mother get her seat? Or
is there anywhere to eat after this concert?
Right. That's already bad. When the music is going, of course those things can happen, but when the music is going, you're into it. I asked my students the other day, we have to have class online. So we meet all together, and it's somewhat different. We can't really play for each other that easily anymore, which is normally what we would do. So sometimes there's a lot of talking. And I asked them, what's the greatest experience you've ever had making music? Hoping for some interesting stories, and we could go off of that. No one asked me. But my greatest experience on stage, there are too many to mention, but certainly one of them is always playing a piano concerto by Beethoven. This is an extraordinary thing. You get a feeling of the power and the meaning of music itself and its connection to life. It's just very amazing.
I'm curious whose cadenza you use for this?
So there's one which is pretty short and very classical in style. And there's one which is very long, has all kinds of improvisatory devices and humor and strange turns. And when I was a boy, I would play the simple one. But now I always play the crazy one.
So let's talk about the Liszt a little bit. Franz Liszt, the great pianist of the 19th century. And it's interesting that we're talking about a Busoni arrangement of a Liszt piece. And Liszt was so famous for arranging so many other people's music. And in this, we have Busoni taking a piece of Liszt's and making it in some ways even more challenging and even broader than the Liszt original.
It's true. You know, even Liszt's own music can be seen as an arrangement or a transcription because he wrote Mephisto Waltz at roughly the same time as an orchestra piece. And Busoni must have gotten tired of hearing Mephisto Waltz played so much by every pianist. And he was challenged. He loved Liszt's music, and he decided to take the orchestra version and arrange that for piano. So that's what you get. You get Busoni's ideas, you get Liszt's ideas in two ways, all kind of mixed together. And I think it was a great way to hear the piece.
I think it is an orchestration, and this is exactly what occurs to me when I hear it, that this is grander than the piano. I also think to myself, thank God the piano has an action that is, so modern and so fast, because, I mean, you could not play this on an earlier piano of the 19th century. You would not get the response from the piano fast enough to play the incredible amounts of repeated notes in this.
Yeah, that's a heroic thing that some of these composers did. Beethoven also. They wrote things that were beyond the capabilities of the instruments that they were using at the time. And it was partly a demand for advancement in instrument building. We don't tend to think about that so much, especially pianists, because a piano from 100 years ago would be just fine. They might have the hammers might be different and the quality of sound might be a little different. But otherwise, it's the same. Back to the 1880s for sure. But in Liszt's time, especially when he was younger, oh my God, the stuff that he must have faced when he traveled to play the piano. And they were interested in standardizing the parts, also improving the action, and deepening the sound.
I think the amount of hand crossings, I think you cross yourself more times in this piece than a priest does, frankly. I mean, it's just outrageous. Just the amount of playing under the left hand, playing and over the left. I mean, it's a delight to watch, frankly, which a concert audience would not get. This is one of the nice things about video, is we really get to see the incredible techniques that Busoni imposes on Liszt and that Liszt has originally of his own. Well, I have to thank you very much for a fantastic 40 minutes of conversation. And it's a real pleasure to talk about music with someone, especially these times when there are so many much less pleasant things to talk about. And I had the pleasure of listening to your Busoni Liszt Mephisto Waltz, and I think the audience is going to enjoy it as well. Hand crossings and all. If they felt uncomfortable to you, they didn't look uncomfortable to me.
Oh, that's great.
I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. It was a pleasure.
Okay, Mephisto Waltz. Who's Mephisto? Have you met anybody named Mephisto? Mephisto Jones, it sounds like a football player. Or Mephisto Pasternack. No, I didn't meet anybody else. Mephistopheles, is a character with a special place in the legend of Faust. He's a servant of the devil, and he comes to entice men to sin and to then accompany them to hell. The Faust story was a big favorite of Liszt, who was quite a religious person himself. And he even had arranged to have a short passage from one of a version of the Faust legend, printed along with the music. And in fact, he called this music "Scene at the Village Inn." And the scene that's printed describes kind of a wild night out, and with a lot of what they used to call the sins of the flesh. Now, our feelings about hedonism and sin and eternal damnation, they may be different from what the people thought of those same things in the 19th century, but human emotion remains the same. When you hear the weird fifths piling up at the beginning, and the devil tuning up his violin, I hope it takes you right to what Liszt was actually writing about, which is the seduction and wild excitement of giving up salvation for pleasure.
Join us on Valentine's Day, February 14th, for the next BCO Sundays at 3, as Rebecca Smithhorn brings us Piano Concerto No. 2.